Hello, I'm Joel Blackford with Beth Hassett Sabbath Fellowship. We are not meeting right now. We're still locked out of the building. We're meeting at residences right now. We're covering the philosophy of eschatology, what you need to know about the end times, your reality, why were you born for such a time as this, without disparate information. We try to make it logical, sensical. We're Beth Hassett Sabbath Fellowship in St. Paul. The days of awe are coming up. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot. Are we going to have judgment after that time? So let's talk about it today. We cover, of course, the philosophy of the end of days. We try not to twist the Bible, try to give you real prophecy from then and now, and we cover the news, whether it's fake or real. We have to talk about it. So we're coming through the months, coming up to Rosh Hashanah. We've been covering the fact that every time we have a new moon, there seems to be a prophecy that's fulfilled on the full moon. That's reminiscent of Moses during the Pharaoh times. Moses seemed to catch Pharaoh on the new moon down by the river, doing what a man does early in the morning, and Pharaoh would be embarrassed, and then he would deliver that prophecy. Then it would kick off during the full moon. Then there would be about 7 days at the end of the month. And so there's also this weird tendency of about 150 days in the Bible, in Genesis with Noah during the flood, waiting on another 150 days, and then the 150 days listed twice in Revelation chapter 9. So there are these time frames that we have to watch. And we are coming up to these important time frames. If something was going to occur this year, you would see possibly the two witnesses show up during the 7 days, during the days of awe. There's 10 of them, but technically there's 7 that are not covered by Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. They would show up during that time frame and start kicking off offerings. It's possible in any given year. And then Dana Coverstone has been covering constantly that after Sukkot ends, on about the 10th or the 11th, things could change in this world, and it could be very serious. He calls it brace yourself times. So we'll see what happens. So the months are Av, which had that full moon that kicked off horrible explosions. Then Elul had, on the full moon of Elul, we had the fire start in California, Oregon, and Washington. And now we're waiting for the full moon of Tishri, which will be interesting during Sukkot as it starts. And then I think judgment will be poured out after that. And I'll make a case for that today. And so then that's covering Dana. And so I already mentioned that on 8/3 we had the Av full moon, then the big booms, Beirut, Lebanon. So once again, new moon, prophesied, full moon, meted out. And so that was 8/3 on the full moon, 8/4 on those big booms in 6 places: Beirut, North Korea, China, UAE, Iraq, and St. Paul, Minnesota, my home turf. Then we move forward to Elul, and the fires started to burn and burn more. And then Antifa started more fires. And now it's huge. I think it's 10% of their forest lands are burned right now. So is this Joel 2, Acts 2? I don't know, not yet. Well, I'll read it to you, but I don't think we're there yet. I will show wonders in the sky and on the earth, blood, fire, and columns of smoke. The sun will be turned to darkness, and the moon into blood before the coming of the great and terrible day of Adonai. I see that every now and then. When I see the sun pop up in the morning, I see it through that hazy filter, and then at night it does have that orange glow. So it's interesting. The sun and the moon look a lot alike right now. I feel sorry for the people out on the West Coast, but one, you should have managed your forests, and two, don't let Antifa start fires and get away with it. And does anybody ever prosecute anybody for any crime anymore? But let's tie this to the full moons. That's when they really kicked off, and some other events kicked off during the full moon. We had this horrible, horrible mess called Cuties from Netflix that came out, and then California passed a bill. I won't talk about it much. You know what they did. They just lowered the penalties for sexual relations with minors, and they passed it. So the fires got worse. So notice the fires really aren't much of a factor in Canada or Mexico. They're everywhere on the West Coast, and they're big, and they're being lit by crazy little Antifa people. So a lot of people are getting level 3, meaning leave now signs from the authorities, and they have proof. You can see at the bottom here, Antifa is starting the fires, told them that they had arrested 6 of them, and almost caught another one today. So poor people out in the West Coast. It's not bad enough that you have natural fires. Now you have crazy people starting them. And then you have crazy people with millstones hopefully around their necks passing this legislation. So it means that if you're 10 years older, I don't even want, you can read it for yourself. I'm just disgusted by the whole law system out in California. This is wickedness. So it's legalizing pedophilia. It doesn't say that, but that's what it is. And then we move forward through the months. So we have Av leading up to Elul, which is the 40 days of repentance, to Yom Kippur. And then we get into Tishri and then Cheshvan. Cheshvan is symbolized by Halloween, which kind of leads into it this year, and then Jeroboam's false Sukkot. It's a false festival. It's from 1 Kings 12. And will there be a judgment time frame during that? I don't know. I mean, it doesn't look good. The election occurs during that time frame, and Dana Coverstone is saying that that's going to be a horrible time. So we'll see what happens. And Dana doesn't talk about things like Halloween because it'll get him in trouble with the AOG religion, but you shouldn't be going out on Halloween, people. It's time to give that up, okay? Come out of Babylon. So let's talk about Elul, that month that we're in right now until we hit Tishri on Friday evening, the 18th. So in the 6th month, that's Elul. It's considered to be the time of preparation and the beginning of 40 days of repentance before Yom Kippur. 29 days, the shofar is blown, so it's a 30-day month, but they blow the shofar for 29 of those days, and then they wait and in anticipation until that wonderful evening of Rosh Hashanah, which is the new year, when they blow the shofar, and it's a big blast. And so this is the time of repentance, introspection, reflection before the days of judgment. 40 is the time of testing. It's important in the Bible everywhere. The king is in the field during this time, during Elul, and he's never accessible during the other 11 months because you would have to go through the protocol and through all the important people and walk down the halls and have a special meeting, and everything would occur that way. Well, this is how the king should be. He's accessible. He comes to the field to meet us, and we see his smiling face because he's looking at his crops. And how are your crops doing? How are the fruits coming along there? Do you have any fruits of your ministry? So he has a radiant countenance right now. So during Elul, the kings leave their palaces and they inspect their crops during harvest time. When kings are approachable, without pretenses, it's a busy time, so kings are noticing who's harvesting the souls and who's lazy, and they're recording it in the books. Then we come up to the staccato war or battle blast when the shofar is completed on Yom Teruah, and so that is that important blast that means war. Yes, people, that's what Yom Teruah, Rosh Hashanah means. It's a war blast. It's not a happy blast of ingathering. It's war or battle. And it's also called Rosh Hashanah. The king returns to his throne. Judgment is affirmed during the 7 days of awe. There's technically 10 days, but really there's 2 of Rosh Hashanah and 1 of Yom Kippur. And so it's 7 days. And that would be a perfect time, just as Solomon dedicated the temple, for 2 witnesses to dedicate the sacrifices. So then there's the final service of Yom Kippur, and then there is the great trumpet blast, which is interesting. The great shofar occurs at the end of Yom Kippur. And then he meets out corporate judgment after Sukkot ends. Okay, so let's look at what's going on right now in the world and just contrast it by the month of Elul and repentance and other things like that. And Donald Trump has agreed to an agreement between Israel and UAE and signed off on it in Washington. And according to how Daniel states this, Trump is, and he's not the he, okay? So I am not placing Trump as the Antichrist. I'm saying he hath strengthened. So the Antichrist is behind this. Gavor should mean probably increasing the fullness of nations to the agreement, okay? So Trump is saying, hey, there's 5 or 6 more countries ready to sign peace with Israel. So we'll see if this happens this fall. We could potentially kick off the Great Tribulation this year. We might wait another year, or 10 years, or 20 years. I don't know, but it could happen this year too. This is interesting because he is increasing, and it's Ravim, it's great nations to the agreement. A covenant with many, that's Ravim, love Ravim, so it's with many. For 1 week, in the midst of the week, he will cause the sacrifice of the oblations to cease. On the wing of the abominations, wing is like my tzitzits that I wear. Okay, he will make wings. Yeah, he will make desolate even till the consummation, which is determined, is poured out of the desolate one. So that's Daniel 9:27. That's the prophecy of those 70 weeks, and we seem to be coming up to the 70th week. So we'll see if Donald Trump gets things going. He's just a player in the end times, people. He's not the Antichrist. I will say this: I'm a fan of Jared Kushner, but he does match some of the significance of the Antichrist because he is really working hard on this agreement with all of these nations. So he is kind of a he in this case, which is interesting. And I don't think Jared Kushner is the Antichrist because he doesn't match up with some of the other criteria of the Antichrist. The Antichrist is not a family man with a wife and kids. That's just not his style. So, but it is interesting that Jared Kushner is working on this. I think there's somebody else working with Kushner to get this done, and I think that's the he. So let's look at some of the things that are important as we lead up to this final day, which is Hoshana Rabbah, and let's look at it in terms of rabbinic input and also Yeshua's input. So, in the blue here, waters to be poured over the altar at the time of wine libations are offered. Okay, so this is during that last day, this last great day, this Hoshana Rabbah of Sukkot. Okay, that's what we're working through to that last day. And water libation on the festival of Sukkot is offered only at the daily offering brought in the morning. Interesting. Okay, so Yeshua was put on the cross in the morning. On all the 7 days of the Sukkot festival, a water libation is poured on the altar. The practice is a halakha communicated to Moshe on Mount Sinai. The water is poured on a separate libation together with the morning wine libation. So this is from Chabad. Okay, and so that's Orthodox Judaism. And now on the last day of the festival, on Hoshana Rabbah, Yeshua stood and cried out, "If anyone is thirsty, let him keep coming to me and drinking. Whoever puts his trust in me, as the scripture says, rivers of living water will flow from his inmost being." Now he said this about the Spirit, whom those who trusted in him were to receive later, and the Spirit had not yet been given because Yeshua had not been glorified. So that's John 7:37 through 39. So what I want you to see is Passover rhymes with Sukkot. They talk to each other the whole way through. Passover is a 7-day festival. Sukkot is a 7-day festival. Yeshua, you can see Yeshua there. He's kind of the middle person in this picture. Well, you have one guy that turns towards him, like the one goat. I'm sorry, one goat turns toward the center and faces for the people, and then one goat turns away, and one of the thieves turns away from Yeshua and rejects what he has to say. So I think the living water is when the guard pokes Yeshua's side, and the water and the blood, you could call it wine. It's like that because that is part of the offering that we have whenever we take communion. And so that would be water and blood. And that would be very similar to what occurred on the cross and during Sukkot. So it's the mixture of those two, the different libations, the water libation and the wine libation. So keep it in mind. Now this is from David Stern, Dr. David Stern. He's a brilliant theologian. And so this is going to take some time, but this is a good teaching. So just stick with it because you'll get something out of it. Okay, on the last great day of Hoshana Rabbah, so it is the great day. In the Greek, it would be megas. And so the trumpet, the megas trumpet, would be the big trumpet, and this would be the great day. Okay, the 7th, the last day of Sukkot, was its climax. Throughout the 7 days of the festival, a special Cohen had carried water in a golden pitcher from the pool of Siloach. That's Siloam, okay, so that's the healing pool, okay, that everybody wanted to hop in when the water was moving, to be poured into a basin at the foot of the altar by the Cohen HaGadol, the big Cohen. It symbolized prayer for rain, which is, Israel doesn't get rain during the summer, they get rain during the fall and the spring, and so they're praying for rain right as Sukkot ends, which begins the next day on Shemini Atzeret. And it was pointed out during the outpouring of the Ruach HaKodesh on the people of Israel. So it's like an outpouring. It's like God's Spirit being poured out of them. It's like during the summertime, Pentecost, Shavuot. The rabbis associated the custom with Isaiah 12:3. With joy shall you draw water from the wells of salvation. That's drawing the wells of Yeshua. In a suggestive reflection of how the holiday used to be celebrated, today's Moroccan Jews pour water on each other on Sukkot. On the 7th day, the water pouring was accompanied by the Kohanim, that's the Cohens, plural, blowing gold trumpets, Levi'im, the Levites, singing sacred songs, and ordinary people waving their lulavs and chanting the Hallel. So that's Psalms 113 through 118. They're sung. They would sing them at all the festivals, and which includes the closing verses, which is Adonai, please save us. So that's Hoshana, okay? Adonai, please prosper us. Blessed is he who comes in the name of Adonai. We have blessed you from the house of Adonai. God is Adonai, and he has given us his light. Okay, so that's Yeshua coming in. Once again, what I'm telling you is that Passover, because he's coming in on uh, oh goodness, I'm blanking on the festival just before Passover when he comes in. I'm so sorry that I'm blanking on that right now. But you know that's on Sunday, and so he comes in before Passover on that Sunday, riding on the donkey, and they say Hoshea na during that time frame and throw down the Palm Sunday. Thank you. I look at the palms and I see it. I had a mental block. You know what it is. So anyway, they threw down the palms and they screamed Hoshea na, and that is like what they would say during the festival of Sukkot on that last day. So just keep that in mind. They mirror each other. They do that all the time. So the words "Please save us" led to the days being called Hoshana Rabbah, the Great Hoshana. This prayer had messianic overtones, as is seen from its use when Yeshua made his triumphal entry into Jerusalem a few days before his execution. It was also a prayer for salvation, Yeshua, from sin, for Hoshana Rabbah was understood to be absolutely the final chance to have one's sins for the year forgiven. On Rosh Hashanah, one asks to be inscribed in the book of life, so keep that in mind. Friday evening and Sabbath, which is Rosh Hashanah, you would ask to be inscribed in the book of life. And I would start repenting right now if you haven't started already, okay? And if you need a context for that, see Revelation 20:12, part B to the verse, but read all of chapter 20 because you're going to see a lot going on there. And on Yom Kippur, one hopes to have that inscription sealed, yet in Jewish tradition, there remained an opportunity for forgiveness all the way up to Hoshana Rabbah. Okay, technically it's supposed to be set on Yom Kippur, but it looks like all the way up to Hoshana Rabbah. So a connection between the possession of the Ruach HaKodesh, that's God's Spirit, and ecstasy or religious joy is found in the ceremony of water drawing. The Simcha Ba'it HaShovena, the feast of water drawing on the festival of Sukkot, the Mishnah said that he who has never seen this ceremony, which was accompanied by dancing, singing, and music, had never seen true joy. Yet this is also considered a ceremony in which the participants, as it were, drew inspiration from the Holy Spirit itself, which can only be possessed by those whose hearts are full of religious joy. This is from the Jerusalem Talmud, believe it or not, people, and found in the Encyclopedia Judaica. So Stern is mentioning here that Yeshua observed the oral Torah. Yeah, because this water drawing ceremony is not specified in the Tanakh or in the Mishnah. It's only stated in the oral Torah. So keep that in mind. Yeshua, what he's quoting in John 7:37, he's really citing the oral Torah there, people. Okay, just deal with it. Okay, sometimes the rabbis have it right. So it was in the midst of the water pouring, the trumpet blasting, palm waving, psalm chanting, and ecstatic joy on the part of the people seeking forgiveness, and in the presence of all 24 divisions. Now, when you see that all 24 there, just immediately think of the 24 people up in heaven during Revelation chapter 4 and 5. Okay, so all 24 divisions of the priesthood. Okay, and Luke 1:5 cites that Yeshua cried out in the temple courts, "If anyone is thirsty, let him keep coming to me and drinking. Whoever trusts in me, as the Tanakh says, rivers of living water will flow from his inmost being." Compare to Isaiah and other things like that. And the woman at the well, and the ultimate fulfillment of Revelation 22:17. So go ahead and read that. In effect, Yeshua was declaring, "I am the answer to your prayers." His dramatic cry, supported by full panoply of temple ritual, was not misunderstood, as verses 44 through 43 make abundantly clear. His subsequent proclamation, "I am the light of the world," also based on the passage of Psalm 118 quoted above, provoked an even more agitated reaction. So, why do we need Hoshea now? Why do we need salvation now? Because there are dragons in the world, and they don't like us anymore. This young scientist from China, from Hong Kong, just came out and said China designed COVID-19. And so China's angry, and they're stocking up their nuclear stockpile, okay? They're doubling it. So get ready for some things to happen there. China's not happy with being embarrassed. their leadership. Now, I love Chinese people. Remember, when I was in college, I hosted Chinese nationals at my house, and I was very close friends with them. I took them up to my Lindstrom, my hometown, and took them out on the ice driving. That was fun. And so I love nationalist Chinese. In fact, I work with many nationalist Chinese in my software company. So I love them dearly. I do not like the communist Chinese leadership, and I do not like what they're doing right now in terms of building up their military and starting fights across the world, and also taking over Africa and other areas too. They are very dangerous right now. So that's why Hoshea Na is so important right now. Save us, Lord, from the dragon. And there is that idea of Revelation chapter 12, the dragon there too. So now we need to move into the prophecy side of this. This is kind of why I created this video. So this starts out in 1973. David Wilkerson came out with the book The Vision, and he had a vision about the end times and about civil war in America and other things like that. And basically the vision is about ethnos epi ethnos, which would be gangs, people fighting against gangs of people. And right now the gangs are leading the riots, so keep that in mind. There are some good people that are not protesting, but well, whatever they're doing, you know. I mean, they're unhappy about the treatment of certain people. That's fine, but when it's violent, that's not good, people. So Wilkerson wrote about that many, many years ago. So he predicted a worldwide recession, which we're in right now, caused by economic confusion, which we have right now, nature having labor pains. You're seeing that right now, a flood of filth and a baptism of dirt. Well, did we just see that just a moment ago with that cuties crud from Netflix? Rebellion in the home? Oh, are we seeing that? A persecution madness against the truly spirit-filled Christians who love Jesus Christ. Okay, we're seeing that. Now, that's from 1973. He came back in 2009 and said, for 10 years, I have been warning about 1,000 fires coming to New York City. It will engulf the whole megaplex, including the areas of New Jersey and Connecticut. Major cities across America will experience riots and blazing fires. We're seeing that right now. Earth-shattering calamity by the wrath of God in judgment against the raging sins of America and the nations. Timing, I do not know when these things will come to pass, but I know it is not far off. So that's Wilkerson. Another man, I met Henry Gruver in Iowa in 2017, and he prophesied basically the same thing too, that there would be internal strife, and then there would be outside wars against us, and we would lose. And then the Prophecy Club down to the right-hand side there, that's Dimitri Duduman and his grandson Michael Boldea, and he's prophesying basically the same thing again. And I met Michael Boldea, and I talked to him frequently. Good man, godly man. So Henry Gruver predicted that the Russians would attack America on the coast. And I met him again in 2017 in Iowa, in his home state. And then Dimitri Duduman, wonderful man. And Michael Boldea, wonderful too. And I met him in 2013. He predicted that Russia would attack America too. So this is three godly men from 1973, 2009, 1996, 1997 with Henry and Dimitri. And then Michael Boldea came back in 2003 and basically predicted suitcase nukes across America. So he's saying fires and other problems in California, Illinois, Michigan, Arizona, Washington State, Florida, and New York. And people, according to his dream, were sent there many, many years before. And they've been just waiting and waiting and waiting for the sign and the time when they could plot their destruction and carry it out. So they are coiled serpents. And so this is his 2003 dream. If you'd like to hit it, you can just go to Hand of Help Ministries, and you can read more about Dimitri Duduman, his grandfather, and more about Michael Boldea and his ministry. So he's saying there will be suitcase nukes sometime in America from 2003. Now let's move forward. We are in the current time frame with Dana Coverstone. And Dana Coverstone has said recently, then I saw long food lines and people waiting for what seemed like hours, and they're standing in a line and not in cars. I saw ships and ports on both coasts sitting idle and nothing at sea moving. And there were headlines saying that the Baltic Dry Index, the global shipping of raw materials, was dead and nothing was moving in trade around the world. I continue to see shuttered properties closed for business and people in homes wearing coats while looking out closed curtains. Headlines and nationwide outages plague Southwest, and the Americans don't know who to blame for darkness. Darkness in areas of the nation stretched into Canada, and I saw America as lights flickering like a bulb was about to go out, but still had a little light left. So this is Dana warning from September 4th, 2020. Okay, he continues on. I also saw the city of St. Louis and men under So they were armed with suitcases who were getting into black SUVs and headed east and west. So the suitcases are nuclear suitcases, okay? He remembered them from the Reagan administration. And they had handcuffs and they were secured. And basically they were being sent out to the far corners of America from St. Louis. And then they were ready. They had watches, which were alarms, to go off precisely at the same second. And so he came back and said, brace yourself, brace yourself in the word and my promises, and do not rely on your own strength. So that's Dana from September 4th. Then also he said that there would be an October dream, foretells cataclysms beginning on the second week of October, immediately after Sukkot ends. The first thing I saw was a rock, an asteroid, coming flying out of the sky and landing in a large pond. The ripples started off small, then became vicious, so that's a tsunami, and we're tossed by a wind that began to blow harder and harder. So keep in mind, I'm comparing that to what we've already read, which is the seventh day of Sukkot, called Hoshana Rabbah. Tishri 21 is October 9th, 2020, considered to be the final day of the divine judgment in which the fate of the new year is determined. It is on this day when the verdict that was issued on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is finalized. Okay, that is the last day. So once more, from John 7:37, now on the last day of the festival, Hoshana Rabbah, Yeshua stood and cried out, if anyone is thirsty, let him keep coming to me and drinking. Now, another gentleman, I haven't been able to vet him properly, but I've watched his videos. They're very impressive. This is Edward Umling. He is a CPA from Pennsylvania. His videos are like Currency Collapse or Houston, we have a countdown. Someone will take this position, that's basically the Antichrist, this position on the platform soon. So these are videos from September 2nd, the 3rd, and September 13th. And he's saying nuclear attack, Houston. And he's warning us, don't be somber during these days of Elul and watching for the king in the field. Then the fall festivals, Houston, we have a countdown. So don't be somber during the days of joy of God's festivals, but be prepared for the fact that there's probably a nuclear attack coming against Houston. Interesting. So that was Edward Umling. This is Sister Kim. I don't know if she's trustworthy or not, but she's saying the same thing. Houston, we have a problem, a fiery judgment, a shift of change in September, elevated level of judgments, more severe and intense, will shake his people to their core, many cities. So she's saying Houston, South Carolina, New York, and California. So we'll see what happens. But that's 3 so far that are saying that, and Houston is listed twice, so be aware of that. I'm citing this because the next person I can't trust, but I just want to cite him anyway, just because I want to. So you should start to prep. Immediately stock up on goods needed to survive and support your life. Food, water, paper goods, defensive weapons. You see what he said after defensive weapons. There are anarchist groups that are growing in our nation, and they will get larger, and the protests will be broader. They're part of the Democratic Party. I mean, no one has said anything bad about them at all from the Democratic side. The Republicans aren't perfect either. We shouldn't be divided the land for gain. So these groups will use shock and awe tactics. They will employ lockdowns, and they will minimize organized public resistance because of their tactics, which are very excellent. The communists used them in 1917, and Mao Zedong used them in China in 1947. So keep in mind, these techniques have been used. They always work against people that are afraid to stand up for their own rights. So be prepared for martial law nationwide. So this is from a guy named Tim Besmer. Okay, so this is Frank. I don't know if Frank's right or wrong. This is what he's talking about. He's warning that we're going to have these horrible judgments coming against us, and so we'll see. We'll see. He's talking about a 10.0 earthquake in California and the death of President Trump. It's Frank. Okay, he was wrong last year. Now, the reason why I cite him is that he says the sign of knowing that he's right and that God is speaking to him is 4 evangelists die that are men that are or men and women that are problematic. Kenneth Copeland, Jim Baker, John Shorey, and Joyce Meyer. So we'll see if these people actually die on the same day. Then Frank is correct. So we'll see. I mean, he's not been right in 2019, so keep that in mind. But I want to cite it just because that's a very intriguing prophecy. So let's discuss the fact that these people that are so prophetic and faith healers and things like that, well, when COVID-19 came, did any of them go out and heal anybody? Nope. They ran and counted their money. So the Midwestern Baptist calls them money-grubbing wahoos. And it's hard to disagree with them because this Pentecostal and charismatic movement is dying because these leaders are so corrupt. They are looking for the money, and they're wolves in sheep's clothing. So there are others out there. There are so many on YouTube land, and I won't list their names just because one of them has threatened to sue me. I won't mention who she is, but one of these people on the list here has threatened to sue me. And another one has gotten into a fight with me because he prophesied over me twice and he was wrong. And another one on this list has sued other people that have exposed him. And then one of them is very sickly and getting more sickly as a result of false prophecies all these years. So keep that in mind, people. Okay, there's a lot of false prophets out there, and they're going to get worse. And some of them in the middle here are just money grubbers. Well, okay. So anyway, this is some of their prophecies. They're out there. I monitor these. These are all false prophecies. Just throw them all away. Okay, move on. This sounds like a false prophecy, but I'm still not ready to write it off. The person, Tim, this fellow that happened to compile this, is a false prophet because he's always predicted a rapture date. Always, always, always. And he's OCD. He's got big issues with that. He just can't stop. But this Natan fellow from Israel, he went toe-to-toe with the rabbis, and he was right. So he's still saying that Gog is Obama, and he will bring all the nations against Israel at some point in time, and that we're only months away from the start of the Great Tribulation. So we'll see what happens here, and World War III and things like that. So I still like Natan's message. I don't think he's a false prophet, but a lot of other false prophets are out there trying to make money off him. So my comment on all of this is when you see Trump and Netanyahu and other leaders making these peace agreements, keep in mind that every time you trade land for peace, according to William Koenig on the right-hand side, these are all of his chapters of his book, Eye to Eye. All these catastrophes happen under these presidents based on them trading land for peace with Israel. So don't do it. Just don't do it. And so if you want to read his book, Eye to Eye, that's William Koenig. Nice fellow. Good believer. So the birth pangs are occurring right now. We're in seal 3, waiting for seal 4. The tribulation is 3.5 years. The Great Tribulation is the last 3.5 years. It's time to pray, people, because it's going to get uglier as we move forward. The two witnesses would probably show up. If we were going in this year, they'd show up beforehand. I'm not sure that we're going in, but it's possible. And then the trumpets are the first 3.5 years, and the bowls are the last 3.5 years. It's all linear, people. There are narrative breaks, but they're linear. The birth pangs of Matthew 24 look like the seals, and that means that we would have a horrible amount of deaths coming up as we've already moved through seal 3, and you see the food prices rising right now, so you see all these seals open already. And then seal 4 is 4 different types of death coming 4 different ways, and so keep that in mind. The supernatural sword, drought, just death, and biowarfare, which could be COVID-19. 1.94 billion deaths. Seal 4, as we mentioned. Seal 5 is martyrdom. Seal 6 is burning figs. And then this is a template that could potentially work in terms of going through the trumpets. They would be about every 6 months, and they would be announced on a new moon. You'd wait 15 days. On the full moon, they would be judged and happen. And then you would have 15 days-ish at the end before the next one would start off on the next new moon. And so this would be a timetable for the trumpets, and when the two witnesses would be there. And this would be for the bowls, the last 3.5 years. What are we supposed to be doing right now? We're supposed to be holding our hands up and praising God. That's what we do. He does all the work. This is a confrontation of Satan and the fallen angels. This is not about the people that believe in Yeshua. We stand by and witness this. So raise your hands up. That's the first use of emunah, which is faith, pistis in the Greek. When Moses was there raising his hands as Amalek was fighting against the Hebrews. So keep it in mind. This wicked spirit is going on right now, and it's time to fight back. So that's how you get garments. You pray and you stay in the faith, and that's how you get white garments. That's Yeshua's giving you the white garments. It's a wedding. Thank you very much for your time. Be blessed, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.